Do you know what it feels like to show up at your 8-year-old son's birthday party and find a city dump truck parked in the middle of your racetrack? Because I do, and let me tell you, nothing kills the vibe faster than a diesel engine idling where kids are supposed to be racing go-karts. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Wrong address, GPS glitch, maybe a driver with the world's worst sense of direction. But then I saw her. Karen Whitmore, president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association. White slacks, oversized sunglasses, lips twisted in that smug HOA smile like she'd just served me a gluten-free cease and desist. She was standing there next to the truck like she owned the place, clipboard in hand. I walked up calmly, still holding my son's birthday cake, a blue frosting and all, and asked the only question that made sense. Karen, what in the hell is this? She didn't even blink. This land is under community jurisdiction now, she said, tapping her clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments. Your little speedway, she added with air quotes, is in violation of neighborhood safety codes. We're reclaiming it as a public utility buffer zone. A public what? Behind me, a dozen kids in helmets were waiting on the start signal. My son, Elijah, still in his brand new racing suit, was holding the steering wheel of his cart with both hands like it was the only thing keeping him from crying. This was supposed to be his dream day. Instead, he got a front row seat to watch a woman in a pearl necklace bulldoze the one place in the world he felt like a champion. That's when I realized this wasn't about zoning. It wasn't about safety. This was personal. And it all started 6 months ago, with a worn-out patch of grass, a dusty auction, and a promise I made to my boy the day he turned 8. When I first saw the lot, it didn't look like much. Half-forgotten county land at the edge of the suburb, boxed in by trees and a faded no trespassing sign that time had nearly erased. But to me, it was perfect. Wide, flat, open, it had the bones of a track. More importantly, it was outside the reach of the local HOA. My lawyer and I made damn sure of that before I placed the first bid. No fine print, no buried clauses, no subject to neighborhood review, nonsense. I wasn't just buying land, I was building a legacy. See, my name's Darius Caldwell, retired NASCAR driver, 2-time Daytona finalist, one lucky crash away from a third. These days, I don't chase trophies, I chase moments with my family. I've got a wife who knows how to read a man's soul and a son who thinks horsepower is a personality trait. And after Elijah told me, eyes lit up, heart on fire, that he wanted to race like me and his granddad, I knew what I had to do. That land became his dream before the ink on the title was even dry. We built it together, me and my dad, Earl Caldwell. The man's a legend, NASCAR Hall of Fame, known for his gravel voice and his gold heart. He once said, if you can't pass him on the turn, build your own damn track. So we did, a real karting school, top-grade asphalt, pro-level safety barriers, solar-lit timing gates, instructors, all retired racers, my people. It was more than just cones and curves. It was a pipeline, a place where kids could learn, grow, believe. And for the first 6 months, it was magic. Every day after school, local kids would show up with dreams in their eyes and grease on their hands. Parents thanked us, teachers cheered us on. But not Karen. Karen watched from across the HOA boundary line like a vulture perched on a lawn chair. And when she finally swooped in, it wasn't just to clip our wings. It was to bury the whole damn track. The first red flag didn't come with a siren, it came with a smile and banana bread. About a week after we opened the track, Karen showed up at my front door with a warm loaf, a clipboard, and that hi neighbor tone that sounds friendly until you hear the threat behind it. Mr. Caldwell, she said, pronouncing my name like it was something she found on the bottom of her shoe. Just wanted to formally welcome you and your lovely family to the Oak Hollow extended community. I raised an eyebrow. Extended? Oh yes, she beamed. Technically, you're just outside our jurisdiction, but as the president of the HOA, I'd like to think of our neighborhood as inclusive. I didn't say what I was thinking, mostly because my son was sitting at the kitchen table drawing race cars and humming the Daytona theme like it was gospel music. Instead, I just nodded and thanked her for the banana bread. It smelled like it had something to prove. Karen wasn't done. I've noticed a bit of traffic lately, she said, glancing toward the driveway where 3 minivans were parked. All those young drivers, very spirited, but some of our residents have expressed concerns. Noise, dust, you understand. I told her we'd followed all city codes. We had a noise barrier wall, limited hours, permits posted in full view. The whole thing was as by the book as you can get without marrying the librarian. She just smiled wider. Oh, I'm sure you've done your homework, but around here, we like things peaceful, predictable. No offense, but go-karts aren't exactly part of our aesthetic. And there it was, the moment I realized this wasn't about traffic or noise or even banana bread. It was about control. I watched her walk back to her Lexus SUV, the kind of car that comes with an attitude pre-installed, and drive off like nothing had happened. 2 days later, we received a letter in the mail. Notice of Compliance Review. To Darius Caldwell, Caldwell Youth Motorsports Foundation. From Ocala, the Homeowners Association. Subject, unpermitted commercial activity adjacent to residential zone. According to Karen's review, our school was negatively impacting the character of the community and inviting unsafe elements into a family neighborhood. No signature from a government official, no city seal. Just a printed HOA letterhead, an invented authority, and enough legal-sounding buzzwords to make a mall cop feel like the FBI. I called our lawyer. He laughed and said the HOA had as much jurisdiction over our land as a Waffle House waitress has over an airstrike. Still, I kept the letter. Because I knew this wasn't a one-time scare tactic. Karen had fired her first shot, and from the way she strutted around with that clipboard in the weeks that followed, you'd think she was General Patton preparing for war, if Patton had a pearl bracelet and an unhealthy obsession with decorative fountains. She started small, anonymous complaints to the city about illegal parking, which turned out to be parents waiting in their cars. Then came the accusation that we were hosting unlicensed sporting events. When we proved everything was permitted, she switched tactics again, this time claiming our safety lights were a visual nuisance to the subdivision across the creek. Each time we responded professionally, calmly, and legally. Each time she escalated just a little more. That's how people like Karen operate. They don't show up with bulldozers on day one. They show up with banana bread and poison the ground one slice at a time. The first time a kid didn't come back to practice, I figured it was a scheduling issue. The third time, I knew something was wrong. Parents who used to wave from their SUVs suddenly avoided eye contact. Emails that once confirmed signups now asked vague questions about insurance coverage and background checks. One afternoon, Patrice pulled me aside and said, "You might want to see this." She held up her phone, and there it was, a next-door post from someone named Concerned Neighbor 84. Has anyone else noticed the unlicensed motorsport school operating next to our neighborhood? Rumor has it some of the instructors have criminal histories, just trying to keep our community safe. The comments were worse, people speculating, gossiping, throwing around words like gang-affiliated and unsupervised minors. A few residents defended us, but they were quickly drowned out by HOA loyalists stirring the pot with Karen-flavored paranoia. I didn't need a detective to figure out where it started. Only 2 people had access to our old staff bios, us and Karen, who had requested them for community transparency when she first welcomed us. The bios were clean, nothing shady, just professional history. But one of my instructors, Jamal, had once been mistakenly arrested at a protest 10 years ago. No charges, no record. Didn't stop Karen from digging that up and framing it like he was a gang enforcer moonlighting as a kart coach. Jamal came to me furious. "Man, I've spent my life mentoring kids. Now I'm being treated like a felon because I showed up in a hoodie?" I didn't have a good answer. Meanwhile, Elijah had started asking why his classmates weren't coming to his practices anymore. "I thought they liked racing," he said one night, picking at his mac and cheese. "Did I do something wrong?" God, that hit harder than any crash I ever had on the track. I kept telling him it wasn't his fault, but part of me knew that if this continued, there wouldn't be a track left to protect. Then came the fire marshal. He showed up on a Thursday with 2 deputies, a checklist, and a forced smile. "Routine inspection," he said, flipping through paperwork that looked like it had been faxed in from 1997. According to him, an anonymous tip suggested our fire extinguishers were expired and our storage area was a hazard. Spoiler alert, everything was up to code. I keep this place tighter than a pit crew on lap 199, but that didn't stop him from issuing a temporary operations hold until we could resubmit fire safety documentation. It was a 3-day shutdown, not long, but long enough to get into parents' heads. And just like that, Karen got her first real victory. The rumor mill exploded. Safety violations this, shutdown orders that. Never mind that it was cleared by Monday, the damage was done. Attendance dropped, sponsorships paused, even my accountant called to ask if we needed to revisit the business model. And right when I thought it couldn't get worse, Patrice found another letter in the mailbox. To whom it may concern, your property has been scheduled for reassessment based on commercial use violations. Please prepare for evaluation adjustment and potential zoning review. Oak Hollow, Zoning Compliance, Task Force. We both stared at it in silence. There is no such thing as the Oak Hollow Zoning Compliance Task Force. That's when it hit me. She was inventing agencies now. Karen had gone full wizard of HOA, conjuring fake departments, spreading lies, calling in favors, all to choke us out of existence. One forged document and whispered rumor at a time. I'd seen dirty racing before, but this wasn't track tactics. This was character assassination wrapped in neighborhood etiquette. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to erase us. I didn't grow up thinking the world was fair, but I did grow up believing in process. You hit a wall, file the paperwork, make the call, have the meeting, show the receipts. So that's what I did. I started with the city zoning office, where I met with a guy named Alan who wore the same tie all 3 times I visited. Nice enough, always chewing gum, always slightly confused. I mean, technically, Mr. Caldwell, he said, scrolling through outdated digital maps on a monitor the size of a pizza box. Your parcel's outside Oak Hollow's charter boundary, but let me zoom in. Yep, about 140 feet. Which means? It means they don't have a legal toe to stand on. I leaned forward. Then why are we getting these letters, these inspections, these shutdowns? He shrugged. Sounds like neighborhood politics. But officially, you're clear. This is county land. HOA has no jurisdiction here. I got it in writing, had it notarized, slapped a fresh copy in my office wall frame, right next to Elijah's first lap time certificate. But I didn't stop there. I emailed Karen directly, politely. Attached the zoning letter, explained the confusion, offered to meet at a time that worked for her to clear the air and maybe build some understanding. It was the kind of message you write when you don't want trouble, just peace. She replied the next day. Dear Mr. Caldwell, thank you for your note. While the land may technically fall outside HOA jurisdiction, it still impacts our community. Perhaps you should consider how your presence affects the peace and cohesion of the neighborhood. I'd be happy to refer you to a realtor if relocation becomes necessary. Warmest regards, Karen Whitmore, President, Oak Hollow, HOA. I read that email 3 times. She offered to help me move from my own land that I bought for my son, that she has no control over. And peace and cohesion? That's suburban code for you're not welcome here. I forwarded the message to our lawyer. He told me it was towing the line of a civil rights violation, but not quite enough to trigger anything actionable. Not yet, not unless it got worse. Spoiler, it got worse. A few days later, I got word from one of my instructors that the local youth commission, the same one we partnered with to offer low-cost karting programs for underprivileged kids, had suddenly reevaluated our contract. No more subsidies, no more referrals, just a generic thank you for your time email signed by someone I'd never even met. I called the rep we'd worked with directly. She sounded apologetic, rushed. Look, Darius, I'm sorry. We got a few calls. Complaints, really, about your instructors, the crowd, the environment. The board just felt it wasn't the right fit anymore. I asked if Karen's name came up. There was a pause, and then she sighed. Off the record? Yeah? I hung up, sat in my office, and stared at the framed zoning letter on the wall like it was a piece of paper from another planet. I thought about Elijah, about how excited he was for the upcoming race, about the way he looked up to me and Earl like we were some kind of superheroes. And I thought about how Karen had never once spoken to me like I was a neighbor. Only a problem. Patrice saw it too. She kept it together for Elijah, but I could see the tension behind her smile, the way her jaw set every time a new notice arrived in the mail, the way she started double-checking the locks at night. That week, I went to a community HOA meeting, not because I had to, but because I wanted to speak as a neighbor, as a father, as someone who was trying to do something good. Karen saw me walk in and smiled like I was a stain on her designer rug. When the floor opened to comments, I stood and introduced myself, explained who I was, what the karting school was about, that we weren't a business disrupting the neighborhood, we were a community program giving kids something to believe in. Some people nodded, a couple clapped. Karen leaned forward, hands folded. Mr. Caldwell, she said sweetly, we appreciate your passion, but this meeting is for residents, and as you've pointed out many times, you're not part of Oak Hollow. There was a beat of silence. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. I smiled. You're right, I'm not part of Oak Hollow. I'm something more dangerous. Oh? She asked, eyebrows rising. I'm the one neighbor you can't control. She didn't respond, just sat back and smoothed her skirt, but I saw the flicker in her eyes, the first crack. I left that meeting calm on the outside, but boiling underneath. That was the last time I tried to play nice. The next move was hers, and it was going to be nuclear. It was my dad who found the crack. Not literally, though he did point out a hairline fracture in the timing booth glass that I'd been ignoring for 2 weeks. No, I mean the crack in Karen's story. We were sitting in the garage one evening watching Elijah tear around the practice loop in his favorite red cart, the one he named Lightning Justice because he said it sounded like revenge, but faster. Earl sipped a root beer, chewing on a toothpick like it owed him money. "She's fighting too hard," he said, nodding toward the stack of compliance letters on my workbench. "This ain't about noise or traffic, this is about money." I raised an eyebrow. "You think she's trying to buy the land?" He shook his head. "I think she already sold it." I laughed. "How do you sell land you don't own?" "Same way people rob banks," he said. "They just hope no one's watching." The next day, Earl made a few calls. Being a racing legend means you know a lot of people: mechanics, developers, lawyers, and more than a few retired lobbyists with skeletons in their closets and Rolodexes the size of phone books. By the end of the week, he had something. It was a scanned copy of a development proposal submitted by a firm called Palisade Development Partners to the City Council. Big name. Luxury projects. Mostly high-end hotel properties and resort communities. The proposal outlined a strategic partnership with Oak Hollow HOA, dated 2 months before I ever bought the land. It described the parcel as future development site for a 5-star boutique hotel and included architectural mock-ups of infinity pools, valet loops, and tennis courts. The signature at the bottom? Karen Whitmore, listed as Community Representative, Oak Hollow Region. I read it 3 times. The woman who swore we were a public nuisance had already promised the land to a corporate developer, before the county even put it up for auction. According to the memo, the hotel project was part of a planned community expansion. Karen had presented the land as available upon HOA acquisition. Except there was one problem. I won that land, legally, on record, with a clean title and 0 restrictions, meaning the deal she signed was built on nothing. Earl leaned over and pointed to a line buried in the annex. Anticipated acquisition via expedited municipal partnership or quiet title negotiation, pending internal HOA approval. Translation: she thought she could pull some strings, make a few calls, and slide the land right into her developer's hands, quietly, off the books. Probably even used her influence to push the city to fast-track zoning changes. But then I came along, outbid everyone, signed the papers, and put a go-kart track on top of her 5-star fantasy. No wonder she was furious. But the real kicker? We dug a little deeper and found a public campaign finance record showing that Karen had recently deposited $72,000 into a property enhancement fund, a fund she'd never disclosed to the HOA treasury. No itemized receipts, no audit trail. But we did find a brand new black Range Rover sitting in her driveway the week after the deposit. Patrice, ever the researcher, traced it to a dealership downtown. Leased, not bought, but the down payment? Exactly $35,000, paid in cash. She'd already spent the first chunk of the bribe. That's when I stopped thinking of Karen as an annoying suburban tyrant. She was a fraud, a liar, a sellout. And worst of all, she was willing to ruin a program for kids, bankrupt a family, and smear innocent people, just to cover her tracks. I sat at my desk that night, staring at the proposal, the transfer receipt, and a printed screenshot of her email offering me realtor referrals. And all I could think was, you came for the wrong damn family. I've always believed racing teaches you more than how to drive. It teaches you patience. Every pro racer learns the difference between speed and timing. Push too early, you burn out. Wait too long and the pack leaves you behind. But wait just enough. And when the opening appears, you punch it. Karen gave me that opening, and I was about to drop the hammer. The next morning, I gathered my people, Earl, Patrice, Jamal, and 2 of the instructors who'd been by my side since day 1. We met in the back office of the karting center. Elijah was at school, the track was quiet, and the only sound was the hum of the AC and the occasional crackle from the police scanner. Earl insisted on keeping just in case. On the table, the development proposal with Karen's signature. The HOA meeting minutes where she never disclosed any hotel partnership. The car lease documents. The fake letters she'd mailed us. Screenshots from next door. And the notarized zoning certification from the county. This wasn't just smoke. This was a controlled burn, and I was holding the match. We hit her 3 ways, I said. Legally, publicly, and financially. Step 1. Patrice reached out to a journalist friend, Vanessa, who covered local corruption stories for the Orlando Sentinel. She'd been trying to get someone to go on the record about HOA misconduct for months. When she saw what we had, she didn't blink. Her words, "This is career-making stuff. I'll go live the day we get a comment from her legal rep." Step 2. We contacted the HOA Oversight Board. Yep, there's a real one. And filed a formal grievance backed by our documentation. Karen never disclosed any corporate interests or development negotiations in her quarterly statements. That's not just unethical, that's grounds for immediate removal and investigation. Step 3. Earl used his contacts at the State Motorsports Commission to secure a sponsorship endorsement for the karting school, retroactive and official. That meant we weren't just a family hobby space anymore. We were a registered youth development initiative, protected by the State Athletic League and partially funded by a community youth grant that Karen could not legally interfere with. You want legitimacy? Earl said. Boom, state shield. Try and shut that down, sweetheart. Step 4. I filed a petition with the county zoning board to designate the land as a youth athletic development zone based on our new registration. That status would make it a protected parcel, and any attempts to seize or reclassify it would trigger a review by the county commissioner's office and the local school district. We also added a clause requesting that all future development proposals referencing that parcel be flagged and reviewed for conflict of interest, which of course would put Karen's little backroom deal front and center in public records. And finally, just because I like finishing strong, I had our lawyer draft a letter addressed to Palisade Development Partners, the hotel chain Karen made promises to. It outlined the following. The land was already legally purchased and in use. Any construction plans were fraudulent. The HOA had no claim to the parcel, and any attempt to proceed would result in civil litigation and criminal fraud exposure. We attached all the receipts, every signature, every document, every lie, neatly packaged in a folder with a sticky note on the front. Next time, vet your partners. I had one more move, the HOA meeting, Karen's monthly performance of order and power. We were going to turn it into her final act. Vanessa would attend undercover, so would 3 parents of our karting students, all of whom had kept quiet during the earlier drama, but were ready to speak now. One was a teacher, one was a local youth pastor. The third, a deputy with the sheriff's department. Each one had a personal story about how the karting school had changed their kid's life, and each one had a reason to see Karen fall. As we closed up the planning meeting, Jamal leaned back in his chair and grinned. Man, we really about to break the HOA? I smiled. Not cocky? Calm? No, I said. We're about to fix it. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 6 p.m. sharp. I got there at 5:59, not a second earlier. I wasn't looking for a seat, I was walking into the ring. The clubhouse looked like it always did. Fake ficus trees, beige folding chairs, that vague smell of store-brand coffee and retirement. But tonight, something was different. There were a lot more people than usual. And they weren't the HOA regulars. They were parents, neighbors from just outside the HOA borders, even a couple of kids still in karting shirts who probably begged to come just to see if Mr. Caldwell was really gonna roast that lady. Vanessa was already there, plain blouse, laptop open, pretending to take budget notes while her recorder ran under the table. Karen walked in like a queen, returning to her court, crisp pantsuit, neutral lips, pearl earrings, the whole Stepford chic starter pack, and she clocked me standing in the back and didn't flinch. She just smiled. Fake. Confident. Hollow. Let's get started, she said, gavel in hand like she was presiding over a Supreme Court hearing instead of a volunteer committee with a $30,000 lawn budget. First came the usual agenda items, water pressure complaints, the annual fall harvest budget, someone mad about teens loitering near the tennis courts. Then came community announcements. That's when I raised my hand. Karen tried to ignore it. Frank, the secretary, a nervous man with chronic dry mouth, cleared his throat and pointed at me. Darius, was it? Go ahead. I stepped forward, pulled a folder from my backpack, and laid it gently on the folding table in front of the board. I kept my voice calm. I'd like to address recent actions taken by the HOA leadership against my youth motorsport program, which operates outside your jurisdiction but has been the target of harassment, misinformation, and fraudulent legal pressure. Karen raised a hand. I don't believe... I'm not finished, I said. Still calm, still steady. And I'd also like to submit for public record a development agreement signed by HOA President Karen Whitmore with Palisade Development Partners, in which she promised land she did not own in exchange for personal financial compensation. Gasps, literal gasps. I opened the folder. This is the proposal. This is the zoning certification proving the land was legally auctioned to me. This is a scanned lease agreement showing the $35,000 down payment made on her new vehicle. And this, I pulled out the HOA meeting minutes, is proof that she never disclosed any of it to the board. Karen's smile cracked. Just a hair. She leaned forward. This is slander. Vanessa finally looked up from her laptop. "No, it's not. I'm a journalist. This is documentation." Karen blinked. Now people were murmuring. Some were standing. I saw Jamal in the back giving me the nod. Earl leaned against the wall, arms crossed like he was watching a rookie nail their first perfect lap. But I wasn't done. 3 parents stood up next, one by one. The youth pastor spoke first. "My son had no direction before Mr. Caldwell's school. Now he's focused, disciplined, and dreams of racing professionally. And you tried to shut that down for a hotel?" The teacher followed. "I teach 6 of his students. They're more engaged, more respectful, more confident because of this program." Then the deputy. "As a law enforcement officer and a parent, I can tell you, we need more places like this, not fewer, and using your position to attack this man's family and business? That's not just unethical, that's criminal." Karen looked like someone had turned off her oxygen. I wasn't aware." "You were very aware," I said, stepping closer. "You weren't protecting the neighborhood, you were protecting your own pocket." The room erupted, not in chaos, in clarity. People who'd stayed silent were suddenly standing up, asking for a vote of no confidence, demanding to see financials, questioning past board decisions. Martha, the oldest HOA member, who once told me she didn't trust men with motorcycles or muscle tone, raised her hand and said flatly, "I move that Karen Whitmore be suspended pending investigation." Seconded, thirded, unanimous. Karen stood up, shaking, lips pressed into a pale line. "I'll be contacting my attorney." "You do that," Vanessa said, now openly filming. "Be sure to tell them you misrepresented a land deal in writing while serving as a community officer." Karen walked out. Fast. The next day, she tried to tender a resignation. It was rejected. Because the State Ethics Committee had already opened an investigation. Thanks to a copy of the development memo submitted by a concerned citizen, guess who? They wanted her under oath. And that Range Rover might have been paid in full by then, but it was now listed in an asset audit. The neighborhood flipped like a switch. Suddenly, parents were returning. Kids were racing again. The county emailed to confirm our youth athletic designation was officially approved, and the HOA held an emergency vote 2 weeks later. The new president? Mrs. Delgado, a retired school counselor who dropped off banana bread after every community event. The non-toxic kind. I showed up to the next meeting. Didn't say a word, just watched. Karen wasn't there. But her seat was, empty and perfectly polished, like nobody had ever sat there at all. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, it went national. Not viral in the funny meme way, viral in the Karen got caught selling land she didn't own and got her HOA position torched by a carting dad kind of way. Vanessa published her article, front page, Sunday edition of the Orlando Sentinel. Power, Property, and Payoffs, how an HOA president tried to sell out her neighborhood and got lapped by a local hero. She didn't hold back. The piece detailed everything. The hotel deal, the forged compliance letters, the fake zoning task force, the Range Rover, and, oh yeah, her repeated attempts to sabotage a youth program that served mostly kids of color. The article included interviews with Earl, Patrice, several parents, and one particularly damning quote from Karen herself, recorded at the HOA meeting. "Perhaps you should consider how your presence affects the peace and cohesion of the neighborhood." The comment section exploded, and for once, the internet had no trouble picking sides. Suddenly, I was getting calls from reporters, city officials, even other karting programs from around the state asking how we set ours up. Our enrollment doubled in 3 days. 3. The County Youth Athletic Board awarded us a community impact recognition, and Elijah got invited to ride a ceremonial lap at the next Orlando Speedway exhibition. My son, who 2 weeks ago thought his dream track was gone, now had an entire city cheering him on. But Karen? She wasn't cheering. She was testifying. The State Ethics Board launched an official inquiry. She was subpoenaed for financial records, emails, and communications with Palisade Development Partners. Turns out the $72,000 wasn't just shady, it was illegal. HOA officers aren't allowed to accept undisclosed compensation tied to zoning activity. When the smoke cleared, here's what came out. Karen had promised the land as part of a community-aligned resort initiative, while quietly lobbying the city council to reclassify underutilized space. She presented herself as authorized to negotiate on behalf of Oak Hollow, even though the HOA charter explicitly banned land deals without a 2/3 resident vote. She forged internal letters and fabricated a task force that didn't exist, and she never reported any of it in HOA records. The audit uncovered 3 separate consulting payments from entities tied to Palisade, totaling $114,000 over 2 years. The Ethics Board didn't just recommend removal, They referred her case to the state attorney general's office. One morning, about a month after the story broke, a neighbor sent me a video. Karen, in a beige sweatsuit and oversized sunglasses, being led out of her house in handcuffs. She tried to cover her face. Didn't matter. She wasn't a HOA president anymore. She was defendant 42,159 in the state's real estate fraud docket. Even her precious Range Rover got towed, seized as part of asset recovery. When the truck rolled past the old clubhouse, Earl raised his sweet tea and muttered, "Guess she's finally in neutral." The HOA itself rebranded, changed the name from Oak Hollow HOA to Oak Hollow Neighborhood Council, ditched the private security contracts, and opened their books. And wouldn't you know it? Turns out they'd been overcharging residents for years, extra fees rerouted to Karen's beautification initiatives. The new board refunded thousands in fees. One woman cried at the mailbox, said it was the first time she'd ever trusted the HOA in 15 years of living there. They also set up a scholarship fund, partially funded by recovered money, for kids enrolled in community youth programs. They named it after my son, the Elijah Caldwell Youth Drive Scholarship. When he found out, he just blinked and said, "Wait, they named it after me?" Then asked if he could use it to buy more go-kart tires. I told him no. He pouted, then hugged me, and just like that, Karen's empire of manipulation collapsed into dust, not with a bang, but with the squeal of tires and the sound of a kid laughing as he flew around a corner in a cart built by people who actually gave a damn. I still get HOA mail. Karen's gone, but the system loves a good envelope. Last week, they sent me a friendly reminder about clearing brush near the easement line. Earl laughed for a full 10 minutes. He said, "Tell him you'll do it right after you stop running a criminal enterprise for neighborhood children." But honestly, I didn't mind. Things are different now. The HOA, or Neighborhood Council as they prefer these days, is actually useful. They fund block parties, fix potholes, ask before trying to micromanage your window trim. It's like watching a once corrupt referee actually learn the rules of the game. I stayed off the board, of course. No interest in committee meetings or debates about trash bin visibility, but they made me an advisory member, which is HOA speak for we won't bug you, but we know you're the adult in the room. That works just fine. The karting school? Thriving. We expanded the track, added night lighting, even built a classroom for workshops on mechanics and driver safety. One of our instructors, Rico, teaches coding classes now, helping kids rig up their own telemetry systems. Parents show up early to chat. We've got a waiting list. We've got volunteers. We've got purpose. And every afternoon, I stand at the edge of that track and watch Elijah take his laps. He's faster now, sharper, still fearless, but smarter with his turns. He knows when to wait, when to strike, and when to hold the line. Sometimes when he zips past, he flashes that look, that wild little grin that says I was born for this. And I see myself, and I see Earl, and I see every damn reason we fought to keep this dream alive. The tree line behind the track still has the same old oak Karen once tried to cut down to improve the resort view. Now it holds a wooden sign, Caldwell Family Motorsports, built with grit, run with love. Below it, etched in steel, racing is about more than speed, it's about knowing what's worth defending. People stop to take pictures sometimes. Tourists, new residents, parents visiting from out of town. They ask me if the story they heard about the HOA, the hotel, the arrest is real. I smile and nod, then point to the track, to the kids in helmets, to my son racing like he's got wings strapped to his back. Yeah, I tell them, it's real. And if they hang around long enough, they'll hear Earl shouting from the bleachers, "Tuck in, Elijah, hit that apex like it owes you money." Same as always, the Range Rover's gone. Karen moved 2 towns over, last I heard, into a condo complex with no HOA. Poetic, really. She'll probably file noise complaints against her own air conditioner. But here, the engines roar, the kids smile, and the asphalt holds every tire mark like a story it refuses to forget. We didn't just win. We built something no clipboard, no lie, no fake authority could ever tear down. Legacy, in laps.